Alex, hope you're doing well, sir.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Good to talk to you. And Alex, Saturday, fan day, and media day at the University of Alabama for the Crimson Tide football team was a little more entertaining than we probably would have thought going into today. Your thoughts on the media availability period for the players that took place there at Bryant-Denny Stadium?
I was going to joke and kid that you wanted me to talk about what Damian Harris or Jerry Jeudy might have said, but I think we want to talk about Jalen Hurts' comments. It was interesting. I didn't think he'd come out in quite the way that he did. I know there had been some festering feelings there, and I think he just decided whenever he would get the first opportunity to speak to us in the media to finally answer some questions for himself. And quite frankly, I can't blame him for the way he got frustrated with the fact that everybody out there was sort of speaking for him, whether it's his dad or anonymous sources, for him to come out and say, look, my plan is to stay here through December at the very least, and let's just sort of leave it at that. But, yeah, it was interesting, especially the way he sort of took aim at the coaching staff as well.
What kind of impact, Alex, do you think you've been around Coach Saban's program since he's been here? What kind of impact do you think that'll have on Jalen Hurts and this quarterback race?
Well, I think if you want to be optimistic, you probably look at it and say that maybe there's a way that everything being out there now can sort of clear the air and they can all move forward together being sort of on the same page. And I think that's a possibility. I think at the end of the day, Nick Saban sort of has a vested interest in making sure that Jalen Hurts feels like he's a part of this football team and this program, because even if he doesn't start, you'd like your backup quarterback to have the kind of experience and talent that Jalen Hurts has. I think they find a way to smooth this over. I don't think he's going to be happy about it. I think he warned both quarterbacks during the offseason to not bring attention to themselves, and this certainly didn't abide by that. So I think there will be a conversation, and then they'll sort of try to move ahead together. And like I said, I think if you're an Alabama fan, I think your hope has to be that they can all sort of clear the air and move forward together on the same page.
Alex Scarborough of ESPN.com joining us here on The Game on Tide 102.9. And Alex, obviously all the headlines after Jalen Hurts came out and had his statement at Alabama's Media Day on Saturday, all the attention was focused there. Outside of that, what was your biggest takeaway from Saturday?
It was nice just to hear from coordinators for the one time a year we get to do that with Mike Locksley and Tosh Laffoy. And Locksley can obviously tell us that a lot of time in the business has been in the big seat before, as they say, and obviously could only answer quarterback questions to a certain extent. But I think it was telling to hear him say, look, I think running back is the deepest position group they have on offense. When you have a Damian Harris coming back for his senior year, a Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, Brian Robinson, they're loaded at that position. And then sort of, to me, the intriguing thing for him is how do you manage that wide receiver core with the frontline guys like a Jerry Jeudy, a Henry Ruggs, a Devonta Smith. But what about guys like Shavers? How do you mix in the young group with that as well? And then, of course, hearing from Tosh Laffoy about finally becoming a defensive coordinator and everything that sort of goes with that, and the way Nick Saban has sort of tried to teach him some of the things in the secondary that maybe he hasn't had to do as a position coach before to better understand the entire defense. I think you sort of get a feel for what they're going to be like, and it remains to be seen what they are on the football field, but getting some question and answer out of those guys for the one time a year we get it was definitely a perk on Saturday, I'll say that.
Obviously some very big shoes to fill for these guys stepping into the roles on the secondary. What's the status of the Alabama secondary right now from your outlook?
A big, bold, underlined question mark. I think obviously there's talent there. Nobody's going to say otherwise, given the way Nick Saban and that staff for recruits, and especially recently with the young guys they've been able to bring in. But when you're talking about replacing every person who played meaningful snaps in the secondary, that's a lot of people. That's not just 4 starters. That's a couple other bodies there as well that you've counted on throughout the years that are now gone. I think obviously they have some pieces in place. I think Deontay Thompson could be one heck of a player in the SEC. And you look at guys like Patrick Surtain maybe being able to come in and be difference makers right away. The good news for Alabama, as with any question mark I have about the program, is that the schedule sets up as such that they have time to get over what might be able to be some growing pains in that secondary. I don't think they're going to face quite their stiffest competition until they get into late October, November-ish. So while there are going to be a bunch of new faces out there, the hope for Alabama is that they've got some time to get those guys over the learning curve.
Alex Scarborough, ESPN.com, joining us here on The Game. And Alex, what do you think that biggest hurdle for the secondary will be as far as the schedule goes before October? Is that the opener against Louisville and Orlando? Is it in Oxford at Ole Miss? Someone else that pops up there early that could present a challenge to the secondary, probably not to beat Alabama, but at least put some points on the board?
Yeah, I think for sure it's Ole Miss. I don't think Ole Miss is necessarily a program that the betting line is going to be very close. I think they've got issues on defense. I think their scholarship numbers taking a hit like they have is problematic for them, especially in the second half of games. But what they have on offense, especially in the passing game with Jordan Ta'amu, A.J. Brown, D.K. Metcalf, they've got loads of really talented receivers. I think A.J. Brown might be the most talented receiver in the entire country. And with Phil Longo on the headset calling plays, they're going to have a dynamic offense this year. And they might give Alabama a little bit of some trouble with what they're able to do throwing the football and the different concepts they have in that offense there. With Jordan Ta'amu at the helm, I think they're going to for sure be the team early on that tests the secondary the most. And while it might not end up being pretty for Alabama, it might be a good thing to get that one early so they can sort of figure out where they are.
Is there any team in your book that can legitimately beat Alabama in their first 8-9 games?
I don't know. I think I don't, like I said with Ole Miss, I think late they're going to fade. I don't think A&M is where they need to be quite yet. Honestly, I know it's not. It doesn't make for that interesting conversation, but you might get until about the LSU game before things get really interesting. I just think the talent disparity is that distinct. I mean, Tennessee isn't Tennessee right now. It's going to be a while before Jeremy Pruitt can have that program where it needs to be. So even that game to me isn't going to be necessarily one that puts a scare into you. So I think it is probably until around that LSU game, the Mississippi State game for sure right after that. That's when things are going to get really interesting for Alabama.
Alex Scarborough of ESPN.com joining us here on The Game on Tide 102.9. And Alex, let me ask you this. You've been around this program in Tuscaloosa for a long time. So many years, since 2008. Marquee matchup after marquee matchup to start off the season. And when this game was scheduled, looked like it, might be a lot bigger if Lamar Jackson stuck around at Louisville. He's not there. It doesn't look like it'll be much of a competition in Orlando. Do you think that would have any effect on this team not having that big game to build up to right out of the gate?
Not necessarily. If this was a different team where there weren't as many positions up for grabs, there weren't as many new coaches, if there weren't so many things already in front of them that they need to get done and get done in a hurry, then maybe you start to worry about complacency and think, oh, we're going to handle this one easily, and they just sort of put it in cruise control. But I don't think, given everything they have going on, and again, all the positions that are up for grabs, not just the secondary, their position battles on the offensive line, the pecking order at receiver, linebacker, where does a Christian Miller fit in? Where are those guys? Who are the starters? Who are the second-tier guys who come in and play meaningful snaps? There's a lot of things that are so up for grabs right now that I don't think we're going to see a team in Alabama that's necessarily looking past at Louisville. Maybe late in the year we look at that game and say, man, that would have really helped for strength of schedule. That's one thing I think that could be a negative for Alabama down the road if the rest of the SEC struggles, that maybe they didn't have that quality non-conference game. But again, at the end of the day, I think if you're in the committee, you sort of look and say, okay, maybe it's not there, maybe it didn't work out the way they intended it to, but Alabama certainly did intend to have a high-profile game, and we can all just sort of sit back and wonder what if, because it would have been a lot of fun to see Lamar Jackson against the Nick Saban coach defense.
Alex, tomorrow we get Nick Saban back at the podium coming off these quarterback comments on Saturday. What do you expect to hear from him?
In a manner of speaking, I think he'll deflect as much as he can, and if I'm being honest, I think he'll probably find a way to blame us in the media. I say that only half kidding, because I think he's already annoyed with the fact that we've made this the biggest story at Alabama, and probably one of, if not the biggest story in all of college football. So the amount of eyes and attention to it isn't necessarily what he wants. So I think, if anything, I don't think he's going to come out. I don't expect him to come out and necessarily chastise Jalen for anything he said, but I think he's going to find a way to say, look, we're moving past this. We understand where he's coming from now, and we're going to deal with it internally. And, you guys in the media can stop asking you this, and maybe we'll get the Nick Saban rant, or maybe we're going to have to wait a few weeks for it.
When it comes to Jalen Hurts, does he have a point about the coaches not having a conversation with him? Do they owe a conversation to him during this past offseason? Because going into every spring practice, every fall practice, seems like usually most positions kind of reset. If there's a new guy that comes on, if he's the best guy, he wins the starting job. I doubt there's been conversations with a linebacker, with an offensive tackle, or a wide receiver in the past where their position has been at stake. Did Jalen Hurts, was he owed that conversation?
I think to a certain extent he was, because your point is well taken, but only one quarterback can play, and they're not interested in a two-quarterback system. So if that's where you're coming from, and you have a quarterback who started every game, 28 games in a row, has appeared in 29 in a row, and he's done everything you've ever asked him to do, and has said all the right things, and then you have what happens in the national championship game. Just think about it. If you're 19 years old and you've had the worst game of your career on the biggest stage and you just lost your starting job, that's gonna mess with your head a little bit. And maybe there needs to be a conversation. Maybe there needs to be multiple conversations about how things are going to go moving ahead. I don't think anyone's ever had a problem with over-communication. Now, so I understand where Jalen Hurts is coming from. I also understand where the coaching staff is coming from in terms of all the different things they have to deal with, and saying, look, it's just a competition. It's going to play out on the football field. Maybe why do we need to have umpteen conversations? And I think the one wrinkle in all of this is it's not like it's all the same faces there that were there a year ago that know what the deal is. His quarterback coach is brand new. He wasn't there to deal with what was going on. So he doesn't know how to have that conversation necessarily, or feel like it needs to happen. So I understand both sides of this, and I just think that it probably would have been better. And Jalen, given everything he's done, and up until Saturday has always said the right things and done the right things, that maybe there should have been a better understanding and more communication with how things were going to go.
I won't ask you who will start the Louisville game, but I will ask you this. Will the starter of the Louisville game be the same starter for the Auburn game at the end of the year?
That's a good question. I'm tempted to say no, but only for this reason. My gut tells me that Jalen Hurts may take the first snap of the opener, but that's no indication of where the race stands. Because it's just like when we went out to the first day of practice, and in the first group drills, not just quarterbacks working by themselves, it was Jalen Hurts who took the first snap, and Tua was right after. Now, what's that a result of? It's pretty easy. It's seniority. It's the guy who's already started 28 games versus the guy who hasn't started a single one. So I think if Nick Saban wants to start anywhere, and I think the first snap of the Louisville game is for the most part arbitrary, I think he probably puts the ball in the hands of Jalen Hurts, and either they go series by series or quarter by quarter. And so if I'm saying Jalen Hurts might be the first guy to take the first snap, that also means that I'm also leaning toward Tua ultimately winning the job and being the guy at the end of the year. I think the momentum is squarely with Tua, and that it would be interesting to me if it went the other way. But I'll say this, I don't count out Jalen Hurts because of that experience, because of the talent he does have. I just sort of think in my gut that's probably how it plays out.